Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Just moments ago, Brett Kavanaugh was formally sworn in to the Supreme Court of the United States. It happened in Washington, and it happened, as you know, after a full month of very bitter debate. He was the president at the White House ceremony just minutes ago.
On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. Those who step forward to serve our country deserve a fair and dignified evaluation, not a campaign of political and personal destruction based on lies and deception. What happened to the Kavanaugh family violates every notion of fairness, decency, and due process. Our country, a man or a woman, must always be presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. And with that, I must state that you, sir, under historic scrutiny, were proven innocent. Thank you.
A remarkable moment. You wouldn't think our leaders would need to publicly defend the presumption of innocence and that it would be controversial when they do, but that's where we are. Politically, of course, this whole thing turned out to be an unexpected debacle from Democrats. The lessons of their defeat are pretty clear. Creepy porn lawyers make bad national spokesmen. Screaming mobs of child activists scare normal people who are watching at home. Wild allegations of gang rape tend to be counterproductive. In other words, it is, in fact, possible to go too far, and they did. That's not a complicated message, and yet none of it seems obvious tonight to Democrats. The activist left has learned an entirely different set of lessons from the Kavanaugh experience. The Supreme Court is a sham. The Constitution is meaningless. The Electoral College must go. Only a country divided into warring tribes can be ruled effectively. If we can't control it, let's burn it down. That is the message they've internalized. Watch how activists gathered at the Supreme Court and reacted after the Kavanaugh vote on Saturday afternoon. Keep in mind as you watch this, this is not a clip from a zombie movie. It's Washington, D.C., 2018. The children of affluence raging, and the rage continued on cable news and on social media. We've got to eliminate the Electoral College, they chirped in unison. White men are bad. Well, the message was obviously coordinated. Important media figures seemed to be saying exactly the same things at exactly the same time, and indeed they were. They were repeating talking points from the Democratic Party, whose interests they faithfully serve. For generations, conservatives called this the liberal media. But that's not quite right. These are not liberals. They're not people who believe in free speech or transparency or due process or challenging corporate power or any other recognizable liberal value. These are party people. They are hacks and joiners and drones. They read the latest pronouncement from the Central Committee like they're scripture. They repeat whatever they are told. They are robots. Liberals used to defend the rights of the minority, and good for them. Watch now as Hillary Clinton explains how entire states should lose their political power because voters don't agree with the majority of rich kids in Brooklyn. Watch this.
Do you think the Electoral College should be abolished?
I said that in 2000, after what happened to the 2000 election with Al Gore, that an anachronism that was designed for another time no longer works. If we've moved toward one person, one vote, I think it needs to be eliminated. I'd like to see us move beyond it, yes.
It isn't just the Electoral College either. In the past few days, many have been saying the Senate itself should be changed, with different states having a different number of senators. All of a sudden, everybody on the left seems to be saying things like this, including supposedly unbiased reporters. Shut up, Wyoming! Nobody cares what you think. That's the new message from the party that pretends to care about the powerless. But then the left has never been big on self-awareness. Here's one especially amazing example of that. This is an Onion piece waiting to be written. It comes from Tom Steyer. He's a finance billionaire who is one of the Democratic Party's biggest donors. People listen to Tom Steyer only because he sends them money. And yet Steyer's latest crusade is against, and we want to prepare you now for a blast of hot irony, rich, entitled white men. Watch this and savor it.
A group of very rich, very entitled white men wanted to tell the rest of the country, we are going to have our way. And if you don't like it, that is too darn bad.
Yeah, that's what Tom Steyer's against, people like himself who behave like he does. Let us know when you stop snickering, and then think about what Tom Steyer is saying here. He's saying Brett Kavanaugh is not on the Supreme Court because the majority of the U.S. Senate voted for him, as the Constitution prescribes. What's actually happening, says Tom Steyer, is that Kavanaugh was installed by a specific racial group in order to hurt and disempower every other racial group in America. This is tribal warfare posing as democracy, and your tribe is losing. That's what Tom Steyer is telling you. Now, as a factual matter, this is insane. It's the kind of lunacy that would have gotten you booted off a cable channel 5 years ago. It's also a lie, and it's dangerous. It's exactly the kind of thing that Hutu leaders in Rwanda were saying in the early 1990s. Responsible people do not talk like this. And yet suddenly it is everywhere on the left, and not just among the professional wackos pounding on the front door of the Supreme Court. The line between dangerous extremist and U.S. Senator is blurring all of a sudden on the left. Watch noted race hater Linda Sarsour explain.
I want to introduce to you another champion, another one of our people who works for us on the inside. Please give it up to the senator from the greatest state in the United States of America, my state, New York, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Imagine a Klan leader introducing a Republican senator at a public event this way. One of our people who works for us on the inside. That's the equivalent of what you just saw. Sarsour's embrace of Gillibrand, though, got basically no media coverage. It's normal now. The press just applaud it. How far can this go? Well, spend an hour watching the other channels and see what you think. Here, for example, is a guy with a Harvard Law degree over on MSNBC explaining how Trump voters are actually Nazis. Watch.
Trump has delivered for these people on the things that they care about most. He has delivered racism for these people. He has delivered misogyny for these people. And now he's delivered the Supreme Court for these people. We're going to see if this reign that they now have control over all three branches of government, we're going to see if this reign lasts for 30 days or 2 years or 1,000-year Reich.
All the other people on the panel nod. Oh, yeah, that's right. 1,000-year Reich. Keep in mind that hundreds of thousands of American men died to stop the 1,000-year Reich. And an awful lot of their children and grandchildren grew up in this country to vote for Donald Trump, only to be called Nazis for doing it. Not that Mr. Harvard Law School knows any of that. He probably couldn't tell you the year the Second World War ended. He doesn't care. History means nothing to revolutionaries, and that's why they keep repeating it. Heather McDonald is a Manhattan Institute fellow, author of the book The Diversity Delusion, How Race and Gender Pandering Corrupted University and Undermined Our Culture. Peter Kirsanow is the United States Civil Rights Commissioner. They both join us now. Heather, first to you, since it's directly germane to your book title. Into this Kavanaugh debate has been inserted by force by the left questions of race and gender, which are not, certainly race is not inherent to the story at all. It's part of a political tactic. What tactic is it that we're watching?
Well, Tucker, as a close observer of academia, I thought I was inured to incoherence. I thought I was inured to ignorance. I thought I was inured to snarling, narcissistic, blind rage. And yet I am stunned by the direction that this Kavanaugh episode keeps taking. We are seeing the worst of poisonous academic identity politics transformed into the real world with an extra boost from sheer political power grab. This incident had nothing to do with race. It had nothing to do with gender. It was about one thing, due process of the law and the presumption of innocence, and whether a case had been made that Judge Kavanaugh was a rapist. That case was most decidedly not made, and yet we see the academic-inspired Democratic left try to turn this into an issue of race. It is simply mind-boggling. It is incoherent. What we're seeing as well at play is an idea that is prevalent on the academic circuit today, the idea of intersectionality, which is the description of the ruthlessly competitive totem pole of victimhood. And we're talking about a alleged white victim here, female, but now the whiteness card is being played broadly, yet she was a white victim. It doesn't make sense, but it turns out the only thing we know, he's a white male. That's all you need to know. He is the worst of the worst. He's the vilest of all creatures.
So, Peter Kirsanow, I've been watching carefully for the past 3 weeks, trying to figure out what the message is, and I agree with Heather, it's incoherent, but it is intimidating to a lot of people. The second you start throwing terms like white supremacy around, people cower. What is the right response for reasonable people of all races when faced with an argument like this, which doesn't make sense but has emotional resonance and is scary? What do you say?
Well, I think you have to point out what the facts are. Here it is absurd, it is ridiculous, but it is also the only card that the progressive forces have. By engaging in identity politics, as Heather indicated, it metastasizes up from K through 12 in colleges. Now it's in our political discourse because we really haven't heard any meaningful policy prescriptions from progressives since who knows when, but clearly since 2016. So everything is about race. Everything is about gender because they have to pit one group against the other for their electoral advantage. Consider for a moment that if Democrats don't get at least 90% of the black vote, they go the way of the Whig Party in this country. Despite the fact that they've gotten 90% plus of the black vote, they've lost 3 of the last 5 presidential elections. So regardless of what the facts are, regardless of what the issue is, they must make it about identity because they have no meaningful policy prescriptions.
No, that's exactly right. Maybe the rest of us could point that out. I wish you had more time. Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.